That'll be good.
All right, so I'm recording. So watch what you say now.
Uh-oh.
All right. Don't talk about Neil anymore, Victor.
Hey, Don, good morning. Could you repeat that again? We're going to need what? The Slido? Is that what you said?
Slido. Slido is SLIDO. You need a second device, or get really good at flipping back and forth on a tab on your computer. But SLIDO.com, and we'll and then once you get there, there's the code it'll ask you for. It's going to be GYA2.
That's SLI.do.
No, yeah, that's the way they originally did it. But if you click on that, it'll take you to Slido.com. Now you can do that, or you can download the app from the App Store for your phone. Either way is fine. We're going to be using Slido this week, kind of as a way to interact, to get people's opinions and input, as well as questions. Now, if you've got questions during this time, it's a small enough group that we can actually, we can just call them out. But for the sake of recording and so forth, it might be better if we were to just type the questions in. And if you open up Slido.com right now, the first screen you'll see is, it should say either polls, or it should, and if it says polls, it'll say no active polls. If it says Q&A, it'll say be the first to write a question. And at any time on that question one, so you can switch back and forth between polls and questions. Now, as we go through the presentation this morning, as it comes to a poll, when we activate it on screen, it'll automatically change the screens on your phone, so you'll be able to input onto the polls. So as we go through the presentation, we've got it synced so that it will actually kick it into your phones, and then you can just answer the questions that come up to your phones, and then we can roll on from there.
Don, another question. You mentioned the event code it's asking for?
GYA2.
All right.
All right.
Thank you.
Any other thoughts or questions before we get going? We're glad to have with us this morning Elder Ken Rogers, who is the Youth, Young Adult, ACF, Pathfinder, Adventures Director for the Southern Union. Most of you guys know Ken, I think. You guys not know Ken. Richard. So let's just introduce, and why don't you guys introduce yourself to Ken? I know you know him, but tell him where you're serving at, that kind of thing. So just unmute yourself. We'll start with Miguel, and let's go right down the line. Miguel, and then Rick and Victor, and then Richard.
Hi, Ken. I'm Miguel. I work with the Latin American Ministries in Georgia-Cumberland. Okay. So, yeah, we have a few meetings together to organize Master Guys, camps, and youth event with Jorge Mayer.
Yes.
Now we are with Elder Chazarreta. So let's see what next year brings. We are on hold because of the pandemic. So let's see.
Hi, Rick.
Hey, good morning. Good morning, Ken. Good to see you. Yeah, and I'm in the East Tennessee area, of course, and work with the pastors up here.
Okay. Rick, you and I go back many, many years, man. It's good to see you. We're almost neighbors. I work in the office ministerial, and it's good to be able to spend some time with you, picking that brain to see what you can share with us as we try to do some revival in some of our churches.
Good.
And my name is Richard Pinero. I'm the new Southern Region Ministerial Director. I'm here shining Harold's shoes.
Yeah.
Too big to fill.
Okay. Great. Nice to meet everybody. Good to see you. Thanks for joining us today.
So Ken and I have been talking for some time about how do we take the Growing Young material, and actually, because it's not a program, you'll hear this a little later, especially in this first session, how do we take this and help our churches? And while we can do, one-on-ones, we thought, if we could actually partner with Ministerial and help you guys develop something, we could actually begin to spread this. And so what we're doing is a pilot program between Young Adult Ministries and Ministerial that nobody else is doing across the division right now. There's a lot going on with Growing Young Adventists, but mostly it's cohorts of local churches. And so we wanted to try something new today. And Victor and I have been talking about this for some time. And we finally sat down and said, okay, let's get serious, put it on the calendar, and let's see if we can make this happen. So Ken and I have been spending some time in the last recent weeks putting this stuff together. Ken is a certified Growing Young speaker from Fuller. He actually went out and got their training. So we're glad that he's here. I'm uncertified, but
you're certifiable.
Certifiable. That was
there.
There
you go. That's better.
So, having said that, we're gonna jump in. Kind of our process this morning. We'll do the first session, which is going to be the session that we're going to give to you as a PowerPoint that you can actually take. And then what we're going to do is the second session this morning. We're going to look at the very first two core commitments of the Growing Young thing, and let's unpack those a little bit more to get a rounder understanding of those. And then on Wednesday, we'll do the next two, and then Thursday, the next two. And then Monday, what we'd like to do is actually sit down with you guys and do a group think and kind of say, okay, so we've gone through this. How do we build this at a conference level so that other conferences could actually take this and build it out from their ministerial? Good. That's kind of the idea.
Donnie, I just want to emphasize that from a union perspective, it's so easy to do silo ministry. Everybody's busy and doing great work, but sometimes the right hand doesn't know what the left is doing. We don't collaborate as effectively as I sometimes think we could. And so that's why I'm excited about this opportunity to team with Ministerial and at least present some of these concepts so that we could grow together, because we're all anxious to see healthy churches.
Yep. Okay, so Victor, would you mind kicking us off with prayer here, and then we're going to turn it over to Ken for this first session.
Okay, great. Father, we want to thank you for a beautiful weekend and a great time for Thanksgiving and the fellowship that we experienced, though it had been impacted by social distancing. And even as we continue to be careful, we want to tackle a very important topic here that might just be a key to helping us to steer our churches in a direction that will not only help the churches to grow and become vibrant, but to also engage our younger generations in this work that we've been called to do. Please help us be attentive, and Lord, give us what we need, we pray in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
Amen. All right, Ken, I'm going to share the screen, and you can take it from there.
Hey, great.
Whoops, that's not the right screen. Hold on, I'll get this right. This is what's fun about a bunch of old men sitting together.
You did say, you said all men, not old men, right?
Yeah, all men sitting together, yeah.
All right.
You know, my college students wouldn't be near as forgiving. They'd be all over me on that one. So anyway, okay. So you should be able to see the Growing Young Adventist. Is that on your screens now?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right, Ken.
Okay, and Donnie, the thing will pop up for me to be able to advance these slides.
It says waiting for Ken to control your screen, so you should have something that pops up now. Are you seeing it?
No, sir, but I'll start and maybe it'll come on.
Let me do it again.
Let me give you just a little brief intro to how this developed. Those of you did everybody read the book? I'm going to assume you at least have given an overview somewhat to the book. Fuller did some extensive research Rather than saying what's not working, I like the approach. They said, what is working? What's working in churches that seem to be thriving and growing and attracting young people? And what is the staying power to these churches and congregations? Are there some common commitments or core commitments that these churches are exhibiting? And I'm so excited that they did that approach. And to alleviate fears for some people, this was not an Adventist-oriented program. Fuller covered all denominations and brought that in. And I realize that in the world in which we live and in our conservative approaches, that is sometimes an immediate warning flag. Well, is this Adventist? Oh, well, if it's not Adventist, then it must not be good or valuable or truthful. And as we have started this journey for about 4 years into Growing Young Adventists, I'm happy to tell you that the Seventh-day Adventist Church is leading the way in growing young cohorts of all denominations. We've adopted some of these principles. We've been careful as the division has incorporated this vision to give it an Adventist flavor, okay, to make it palatable to our churches, to our pastors. And so this isn't something that we have to be afraid of. And so let me just pause there and take a question or two. Does everybody understand what's happening when we say this is not an Adventist program? It's not a program we've taken and even baptized. We're just adapting it and making it practical for our Adventist churches. What do you think of that concept?
I think to even ask the question creates the awareness of some of the issues that we face, that this isn't lifted right out of the pages of messages to young people. And I think that sometimes that has actually created an enormous hurdle for a lot of churches that have not kept up with the emerging generations and their needs. So we're going to face that, but as long as there are things that are practical and doable, I think for churches, then they can embrace what they can see, and maybe they'll see a little bit more as time goes along. But just to ask the question, I think the sensitivity to it, maybe being right up front with the people like you are with us, is probably the best approach.
Okay, good. Any others? Thanks, Rick.
What I think is that we don't have the pattern of growing young. Other denominations could have more ideas than us, and we just need to open our minds and hear what is going on in the country, in our field, and then apply what is needed. Because if we are so close-minded and think that everything has to come from Adventists, then we're gonna miss a lot of opportunities that is out there. That's my thinking.
Good. Miguel, I would agree with that. Good thoughts.
Right.
I think we need to. My approach is always this: if the Bible says, "Test all things and keep that which is good," the immediate context of that is within prophecy. If God entrusts us to do so with such a delicate topic, an important topic as prophecy, we should be open to whatever is good, test it, and use it. I think we've gotten away from being more biblical as we should be. And that's the way I like to approach it when it comes to challenges of this nature. We are going to find things in all things that we do, even Adventist things, that may not be kosher, for lack of a better term. And we should be testing those as well. Throwing out the baby with the bathwater is just going to shoot ourselves in the foot, so to speak.
Yeah, that's right.
And to add to that, Ken, just knowing that this thing has been pulled together for a number of different denominational beliefs, it lets me know that the problems that we're having as a church is a problem that every church is having. And because we are all having that problem, this might be one subject that we can come together on and learn from each other, because it's not limited to denominational beliefs. It's across the page. And so this is one of those things where we can come together and have a conversation on in an effort to help one another.
Yep, very good. Thank you for those comments. And I think to follow up, Victor, good segue. All denominations are growing old. Every church denomination is growing old, including Seventh-day Adventist churches. We naturally grow old. I'm struggling with that a little bit. Getting close to retirement age, Richard. Who'd have thought that? And I'm here to tell you today, I never in my wildest dreams thought I'd live to be close to retirement age. I firmly believed that Jesus Christ was coming again. And that message was drilled into me in high school, that his coming was imminent. The signs of the times in the 70s, late 60s and 70s, it couldn't get any worse, could it, Victor? I mean, it was politically, socially, drugs, economically, it was a disaster. And what we've learned is that it's continued to get worse. Jesus hasn't come, but the promise is he will return. We don't know when, but he will return. But we naturally grow old, and I'm thinking as I get older, that's nothing I can do about it. It's going to happen. We're gonna get older, and as we grow older, our churches, our congregations, naturally tend to grow older as well. As I travel around the Southern Union and have an opportunity to visit churches in all our 8 different conferences, it's a graying population. I don't see as many young adults or even younger age people in attendance anymore. We're getting old. And what will happen if our churches, you obviously know the answer, what happens if we just keep growing old? We'll die. Have you had any churches close in the Georgia-Cumberland conferences just due to no growth?
Yes.
So as those churches grow old or something, the average age of people who attend church is higher than the average age of the general population. Okay, well, that tells us something. Our churches are growing old. They'll naturally grow old, but we have to find ways to replenish and regenerate our congregations if we're going to survive and grow the kingdom of God. Miguel, one of my first, matter of fact, it was my very first ministerial meeting coming fresh out of seminary. And again, the passion and drive that Jesus was coming soon, and I was going to be part of a ministerial workforce to usher in the second coming. It burned within my heart, and I was single and went to my first ministerial meeting. And the first night they told us that on Wednesday morning they were going to introduce a revolutionary program that would usher in the second coming of Jesus. And I'll tell you, I got excited. And so Sunday night, Monday night, Tuesday, and finally Wednesday morning came. And Donnie, I don't know if you remember this at all or if you were exposed to it, but when they got up, they made the great announcement that they had a new vehicle to proclaim the gospel of Jesus that would usher in the soon coming. And it was the Duquesne projector. You remember the Duquesne projector?
I sure do.
The Duquesne projector was going to usher in the second coming of Jesus because It was battery operated. And you could take the Duquesne projector anywhere in the world, in the jungles of Africa or South America or in the forest, and show a film strip about the second coming of Jesus to anybody and in any language. And then that machine, I think, was about $350 back then, which might as well have been $5,000 to me. I had no money. Conference gave us maybe $100 toward it, but I wanted one of those Duquesne projectors so badly. And now today, 40 years later, you might be able to find a Duquesne projector on eBay or somewhere, but they're relics. And Jesus still hasn't come. What's the average age of pastors in the Seventh-day Adventist Church? Anybody know?
Is it 51 or something like that?
I believe it's a little higher for pastor age.
Looks like about 55, 56.
Yeah, I think it's it's getting close to 60. Okay, and what we're finding, man, we're going to have our ministerial workforce is going to be retiring. Donnie, I think, told me the other day, what, 2,000? How many retirees are coming up?
I was reading that they said that they're from the North American Division. They were saying that over 2,000 pastors were going to be due for retirement within the next 5 years.
Boy, and you look around, and I don't have a lot of things to compare to, but I visited the Southern's ministerial senior ministerial class here not too long ago, and boy, the numbers are down, Richard, from when we were going through Southern and through some of those things. And I'll tell you, I'm praying for a workforce to come up. So there are some churches that instead of growing old, they're doing what? They're growing young. And my point about the Duquesne projector is to tell you this. Growing Young Adventists is not a program. I don't know how many programs I've been through in 40 years of ministry. How many have you been through? A lot of programs. Programs come and go. Sometimes they burn for a little while and burn hot, and then we move on and we go to another program. We look for programs to finish the work. What I love about the Growing Young concept is that this is not revolutionary. It's not a program. It's a culture change. It's changing the way we think and the way we approach. You're not going to be blowing off your chairs as you probably weren't as you read the book. You didn't go, whoa, this is earth shattering. It's just common sense, practical commitments that Fuller found through their research. It's not a quick fix. You can't come in and just apply this concept and expect a church to change overnight. It's not a weekend program. It's not a vote that you take and have your church board approve it and then move on. And it's not a product. It's not a Duquesne projector that you have to purchase. Okay, so it's changing culture little by little. Those of us that like big change, Growing Young concept could take a little while. Okay, but you got to start on the edges and kind of work toward the middle. You tell stories. Oh, stories have become so powerful in the concept of Growing Young philosophy. And so we listen, a lot more listening than maybe we've been doing in the past. We observe, and we realize that our church can grow young. We can change. Okay, so how are we so far? Everybody on board? See where we're headed?
Yeah.
Okay, good. What? And just real quick, I'd like to hear your reaction. What do you think about it not being a program but being a culture change? Is that something that Adventism can wrap its arms around?
I think it needs to. I think it needs to. If not, it's too easy to see that if we don't do something systemically, we're going to die out. You know, it's simple as that.
Okay.
Hey, Ken.
Sure.
Culture is kind of a pregnant word in today's environment. It used to be that when you talked about a culture change, it was more ethnic centered in its approach.
Mhm.
And I think that, we're seeing, certainly, impacted. A lot of churches are much more culturally diverse than they were a generation ago. But what would you say to someone who is adverse to the concept of a culture change? To them, that hints of letting everything that they have known go by the wayside. It might be intimidating to them to think that there's a culture change coming.
Yeah, great question. And we'll address that a little further on now, but let me just tweak that here at the first. I think for growing young, when we talk about culture, it's probably more a way of doing church work. I don't want to say business, but it's the way the church operates, the way we think, the way we approach ministry. That's what they mean when they say culture. So it's not doing business the way it always had to. And I read a fascinating piece this morning early on about the president of Zappos, who just died in a house fire, tragic house fire. When he took at 46 years old. He was a tremendous entrepreneur, but he changed the culture of Zappos, a shoe company. And one of the first things he did when he came in is that he offered $1,000 cash to any employee who wanted to quit. And I guess quite a few people took him up on the money. They took the money and they quit the business. And they wondered what he was doing. And he finally, after all of that happened, he said, here's what I want to find out. Anybody in my company that was willing to take $1,000 wasn't invested in my company and didn't want to stay and work and see us get better. And so he said, they're not great employees for me. That's a culture change. Who would kind of think of that kind of thing? So Richard, in part to answer your question, but we're going to come to it later because it is kind of a roadblock for some of us when we talk about culture, and maybe there'll be a better word that will grow and develop out of this. Again, the nice thing about this is it's not a program. It can change, it can adapt, it can become relevant if we find better words and better terms to use for it. Maybe a new mindset that needs to take place or something. I don't know if culture is a negative word in some contexts. I think it is, but we'll get to that. Thanks, Ken. Good. All right. Hey, let's look real quick at maybe some of the things just in a matter of review. And I hear this. I've done a couple presentations, probably about 6 or 7 local churches on initiating growing young concepts and commitments. And it depends on where churches are, how they are. I did something with the community church there in Collegedale, and man, they were all the way down the road on some of these things, where some other churches are it's just like a brand new way of thinking. Oftentimes we'll say, you know what, my church won't grow because we're too small. Okay, we just don't have the numbers in our congregation to grow. Or some churches will say, we're what? No, we're too big already. We don't need to grow. We're just fine where we're at. And it's interesting. If you look at some of our large Adventist churches, membership hasn't varied very much over the last 20 or 30 years. It's just kind of static. There's coming and going, baptisms, deletions, and depending on how often they clear their records, check that out. And it's not an indication or implication of any church. It's just that membership seems to be very static. And we say, oh, we're not going to grow. We're too small. We're too large. Some will say, well, you know what? This church has been here a long, long time, and we're just too old. We're too old to really grow. And had that happen to a church that I visited in Florida. I said, well, we've been here for years and years and years, and that's just the way we are. Well, that church needed to begin to think differently, new paradigms if they're going to grow young and not just grow old and die. Or we're too new. Well, we're a new congregation. We're just getting established. We're not going to really grow young because we've got to develop our leadership team around here. I'll tell you one thing about the millennial generation, and Donnie's a great resource for this, is they don't wait. Is that right, Donnie? They're not going to wait for change. They're going to do something now. Donnie, can you expand on that just a little bit?
Well, not just the millennials, they're already deep into it. The church that we're talking about now, if you're a college student, a high school student or below, you're Gen Z.
Yeah.
And those guys are picking up the pace even more with saying, we got to do something now. Sometimes they actually even think their way through things. But often not. They just jump in and go for it. But yeah, if they want to move, they're going to move. And many of them aren't waiting for church permission, as we've always done.
Yeah, and they look for immediate results. It's hard for them to think long term. It's like, here I have money, I can do this, and here we go. And you know, it's kind of exciting for those of us that have been watching it. I wish I could take the time this morning to tell you about a group of young adults down in the Orlando area. They're called SALT, which is Service and Love Together. I know it kind of competes with the Southern's program there, but we've all worked out arrangements for the acronym. But they are doing some incredible work in the city of Orlando for homeless people. It's a group of Adventist kids that are that have formed the leadership team. They've got kids coming from public colleges, campuses, businesses, and just to tease you a little bit, the city of Orlando has given this year $300,000 to SALT for their feeding the homeless, showering, job applications, and a clothing distribution program. You know, that doesn't happen everywhere. Other groups are competing for that money in the city of Orlando, and the mayor, Buddy Dyer, I think, has said, we support what you guys are doing. Keep it up. $300,000. That's not a little small amount of money. So things can happen and change. Sometimes churches will say, well, you know, our location, the location of our church just prevents us from growing. We're in the country, or we're in the city, or there's no other churches around us like this, and we're kind of locked in, and we're not going to grow because of our location. No, guess what? Fuller said, that doesn't impact whether or not you grow young. Oh, we just don't have enough money. We don't have the budget to do outreach. I am so amazed at where money can come from. Just like our young adult SALT group gets money from the city of Orlando. No, the church is not sponsoring these kids. The conference is not sponsoring these kids. They're not underwritten by anybody, but the money is pouring in. They had money donated for a shower trailer. And now the homeless people can come and get showers, haircuts, clean clothes, and then they're able to appeal for possible jobs. It's just incredible. So there's money out there, and money will follow vision. Some churches say, you know, we're just so preoccupied. We got a building program going on now, or we've got to worry about this. All those things. Fuller says, you know what? They're excuses. And they don't qualify. Let me go this next slide. None of those things mentioned actually matter for growing young Adventists, okay? So it's not a program, it's not a quick fix, and it is not new. Some churches are already doing some of these principles and gaining on. Let me just take a moment here to get a feel for Georgia-Cumberland Conference specifically. Can you think of a church or two in your specific area of ministry that you represent, where you would say, hey, as you walk in, you could say, hey, this church seems to be growing young. I notice energy. I see younger generations people. I see them up front or on the platform. Have you got a church or two like that that you could just share with us?
Yeah, Ken, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think one church that's moving slowly in that direction is the Lakeview Church. They're trying to get a few more young people involved there in what they do there in the services and all. You also have a little bit of something like that happening at our Grandview Church, where the younger generation is starting to awaken and being given opportunity to do some leading. It's happening in a number of other churches, maybe not on the level that it needs to happen, but there are some things percolating where people are beginning to realize that they have a powerful workforce that's just sitting there idle. One thing that I'm hoping is happening is as a result of this COVID and the need for more media expertise, you're having more of the young people being asked to step into certain areas of church as well. So there's some movement there in a number of our churches where people are starting to tap the youth and young adult on the shoulders, but it could be better. It could be more intentional, I would say.
Okay, but that's great. I'm excited about any movement, you know, and if they're raising the awareness little by little, keep chipping away at it. That's tremendous. Thank you for that. Any others?
A couple of churches up here in East Tennessee that I think of is the Kingsport Church, where David Ryder is pastor. He gets young people involved. He's involved at the school. And it's just a church that has a very healthy young adult, youth, young marrieds, young families. And it's, you know, it's cross-cultural. I mean, it's cross-generational. Another one is Riverview Church there in Greenville, where Jason V. Meister's pastor. He looks for ways to get young people involved, and they're always doing something there. He's actually got some of his high school kids that are serving as elders now. And so, yeah, he's progressive that way. But I think it starts with pastoral leadership, having the awareness that, you know, and then they need to have buy-in from the church, you know, the church leadership as well. But those are a couple that I think of right off.
Great. And yes, it does. Pastoral leadership is so critical and crucial to this, but it's not dependent on the pastor, and that's another great advantage to the Growing Young commitment. I've had the privilege of really being just involved with youth ministry for the majority of my ministry years. One thing, if I've heard it once, I've heard it so many times. The pastor will say, "Rogers, I don't do youth ministry." And my response is, yes, you do. You know, if you say you're not, you are, because the kids know. And they'll say, well, I just don't relate to them. I can't identify. I don't understand. And I said, do you know their names? Do you know the families? Do you know where they go to school? Can you celebrate their birthdays or the milestones and important events in their life? You do youth ministry. To avoid it and say you don't is youth ministry. It's not the best youth ministry. It's bad. But you do youth ministry. And so I'm glad that, yeah, Donnie says you may do youth ministry poorly, but you're doing it. And sometimes that's more damage. Go where the kids are. Be their friend, know their name. Man, I watched one pastor who told me he didn't do youth ministry, and we developed a little relationship. I said, just learn their names. And he went to work and began to learn their names. When the kids came through the door, he would grab their hand and call them by name. Man, you should have seen those kids light up. They were anxious to hear their own name. Well, that's youth ministry. That's identifying. It's just a small thing. All right, I'm going to keep going. Anybody else want to share about your churches in your area? Miguel or Richard, I don't want to leave you out.
Well, I oversee the area where Lakeview is at in Grandview as well. I'll just throw something in there. It's fun and scary. It's fun. It's scary because you see the churches that, at least that I have in my area, that are they're on fire for to reach out, especially to the youth, and make it I guess make it count, make them a part of it. And it's interesting because there's a hunger for it, is what I'm trying to say. And like you mentioned before, they're doing things without asking. It's not like back in the day, okay, let's get the board. No, this is, listen, we have done this here, and but they're on the second and third phase of whatever their mind had embraced. And it's exciting, and at the same time, it brings this hesitation, because it is a culture shift. It is something different, the way we're used to doing. So it's exciting. It is.
Oh, great. Thank you. Yeah, thanks for sharing it. But it looks and feels different. Yeah, very true.
Well,
All right.
We had a church that was on that direction, but as soon as the pastor was changed, everything goes back to the. They make a special meeting and they change the whole board. Even the John that was nominated as elders was changed, and they put older people to be elders. So we have to start back again.
Yeah.
In churches like that.
Yeah. Wow. And again, it looks different because it's not a program. Okay. So you got to make it applicable. And of course, the local church is the heart of what we do. And so it's going to just look a little different on different congregations.
Ken, let me jump in real quick. I might add that as we go through this, maybe you can start thinking of a church in your district that you could say, I think these guys are about ready for this. I want to try it with them. Anyway, we need to move. All right. I'll shut up.
No, that's good. Yeah. Pilot type of kind of experimental things. That's good. A Jesus-centered community, regardless of where we're at in the Georgia-Cumberland Conference, is what we're aiming for. Jesus-centered. Jesus is the heart of what we do, and this message so resonates with today's generation, and it still resonates with my generation. It's a movement away from, and I want to be careful and not be misunderstood. It's a movement away from a doctrinal difference, but it's celebrating more a Jesus-centered community. And it's been, I don't know how many years now since the popular phrase, what would Jesus do? And the bracelets and the probably great question, I thought, really helped us get to thinking. But my analysis was, we do what we think our picture of Jesus would do. And that's different for some different people. Some people see Jesus as a corrective person. Some see him as a graceful person. Some see him as demanding and exacting. Others see him as loose. Some as a sheriff. Some as a beneficent Santa Claus. So our picture of Jesus certainly affects how we want, but we want to be a Jesus-centered community. And Richard mentioned that, going back to what is biblical, what is true, what is distinct about our specific church. Well, let's look at this, our specific context. Let me hit this. Fuller says, here are the 6 core commitments. Now, there may be more, maybe less, but they found in almost 300 churches that responded to their surveys about, and they identified as growing young congregations, these 6 commitments: unlock key cane leadership, empathize with today's young people, take the message of Jesus seriously, fuel a warm community, which, by the way, many of you remember the Value Genesis study, largest study done with any denominations, young people. And the number one answer that the young people that took that survey said they wanted in their church was what? A warm, they used that word, a warm, safe environment. Well, what did that mean to them? It meant that they could ask questions, that everything wasn't just force-fed to them and they were expected to give it back in rote memory. They want a warm community to worship in. And prioritize young people and their families everywhere in the church. And then the last one was be the best neighbors. And the follow-up question to that best neighbors was, if the Adventist church closed in your local community, would anybody notice? What would be the effect of a church closure in your community? Are we being the best neighbors? And they got some stories that we'll tell about that as we deal with it. Those are the 6 core commitments. Those are what form the wheel around a Jesus-centered community. So how's our church doing? Well, we better find out. How do we do that? Well, we need to take an assessment tool. This thing's just running on me, Donnie. Let's see if I can go back and pause it. I guess I hit. There we go. What is an assessment? Fuller has developed an assessment tool, and we're going to have you take that in the next couple sessions, an individual assessment tool to find out how you're doing with these 6 core commitments. Fuller, of course, has to sustain their program. There's a little bit of cost. The North American division has provided some funding for us to take this assessment. So we're going to have each of you take that assessment here in the next, probably do that Wednesday or at our next day meeting, and get your reaction to see how you think you're doing with your churches. Or Donnie, explain that just a little bit, how we're going to ask them to take that assessment.
Well, one of the things that we think would be helpful, if you go through the assessment, it kind of helps you see what a church would need to, what kind of feedback a church would get from that by you taking it. So what we'd like you to do is maybe think of a church that you think would be one that you could take through that, and answer it, if you know that church well enough, answer it as if you were that church leader. So that the church assessment is taken by the pastor, then the church board, and then people of the congregation at large, and you get a fuller picture that way. I did not mean to say fuller, but I just went there. Anyway, I'm just naturally a comedian. But if we have you take that and you go through it, then it helps you see and understand what this assessment can do for them. It actually is very telling because we had some at the GCA church take it, and as churches go, GCA has probably put more of these principles into practice than any church around. But we found there were glaring holes. There were things that we thought we were doing well and we weren't, when the whole picture came back.
Yeah.
So Don, just a quick question. I didn't mean to cut you off here. So the assessment that we're going to take, it is the assessment that church leaders and members would take themselves. Now, when that come back, is it compiled to give you a collection of answers, or is it you get individual ones and you have to kind of go through it yourself?
Oh, it will give you a summary, and it actually takes the composite picture and says, here's where you think you are now. As it will actually, I think, if I remember correctly, it will give you yours back to say, so you can see how did I answer that? But it then gives you composite to say, this is your church picture.
Okay.
You think you're growing young here, but of those 6 core commitments, you might have 3 of those in place, but the other 3 are sadly missing. And so you got to, well, here's where we can then beef that up. That will help us over here.
Okay. Good.
I think
Thank
what's been so amazing in the churches that have taken the assessment is sometimes even if a pastoral team takes the assessment and they get the results are, and I'll just pick one. Let's just say they think they're fostering a warm community, and so they score 5 on the scale of 1 to 5. But the congregation has taken that and they score 2, and they're really low. And this really provides some great opportunity for conversation. Why does our church feel like we're not warm? But the pastoral team thinks we're really doing something warm and doing these things. And so you get this dialogue going back and forth. How do visitors feel when they take that kind of thing? So that's kind of the fun stuff. And remember now, you don't have to do all 6 of these core commitments to grow young. You probably should just choose 1 or 2 to focus on it first. So you may want to say, man, we need to be better neighbors. Here we are, this small church, but we're surrounded by community. And what are we doing for our neighbors? Do we have elderly people around here? Do they need yard care? Do they need visits? How are they doing on food and some of those other things? What can we do in our community to be a better neighbor? And you focus on that. So as we do that assessment, that'll be fun. What can a church then do? Well, I tell you, you got to pray. You have got to be a church that prays together and comes together and bring this. Maybe start a book club. I took 8 books down with me to a church, and I said, okay, if you're interested in this, I said, here's your core team people. And I handed them a book, and I said, I want you to start a book club, but look me in the eye and say, Pastor Ken, I'm starting a book club. I'll give you this free book if you'll commit to starting. And they would look me in the eye, took the book, and the church started a book club. Well, they're going through this concept slowly, piece by piece, and they, they're choosing to become a growing young congregation. Pretty exciting to watch the change and the growth that takes place in people. And I'm not here to tell you this is always ideal. I had some saints challenge me and openly confront and be worried, and it's not Adventist, and we're going to have to water down our doctrines and it won't work, and and we tried this before. And you just hold on and you find the people that are willing to commit to it. But I'll tell you, you surround it with a lot of prayer. You are going to need a key leader. Okay, so as you take this concept to your churches in your territory, somebody's got to step up and own it. If there's anything that it looks like a program, to me, this is where it is, because who's gonna drive this? I recommended it not be the pastor. It may have to be the pastor to get it started, but find a congregational member that can buy in and lead this and drive it and be the force behind that, and surround them with a team of people that are committed to these concepts. Who's going to be that core team? What will it look like? How many are we going to have? When are we going to start this? What will it take? Where will we start it? The good news is that everybody can be different, but you got to do what works for your church. Richard says, it's kind of scary. Don't know what it's going to look like. We don't know the end result. And again, risk is part of growing young, but it's good risk. It's good risk. I remember the words of John Lewis, our great senator from the state of Georgia, who said, "Get in good trouble." If you're going to get in trouble, get in good trouble. Man, that thought just resonated with me. We need churches to get into good trouble, good change, and to grow young. So there's just kind of a big overview of what this might look like. Any questions as we wrap up this first part of the introduction? I hope that made sense. We're kind of shooting from 10,000 feet right now, but that's what we wanted to do. Give you an overview of how this is working, where it's working. It's working well in some churches. Others are struggling. Some are trying it. But don't bite off more than you can chew at the first. Don't try to do all 6. Pick one as you work with your congregations and say, wow, this is work. Maybe we can go to another area. I'm going to talk about unlocking keychain leadership here in just a second. I don't know if we have a break before that or not, but how are we doing? Donnie?
Yeah, that was my question. What is keychain leadership? And I'll let you get to that.
Yeah, so I just wanted to point out before we go on to the next one, we're going to go a little bit into this keychain leadership. We're going to take a break after that. If you need to take a break now, that's fine, but we're going to jump right into this and keep rolling. You'll notice in the chat that I'm dropping different resources in as we go. That kind of corresponds with where we are, and you can download those and use those for yourself as well. Just trying to keep things putting stuff in your hands is what I'm trying to say. All right. So Ken, we'll go to section 2. This is where you're going to need Slido now. Get your other device, GYA 2, if you haven't signed into it. You'll see it at the top of the screen on the right. Are you seeing? Hold on, let me get this over here. Okay, are you seeing that now with GYA 2 on the top? Is that currently on your screens? You should be seeing Growing Young Adventist with a GYA 2 at the top. Yes?
Yeah, you mean what you're presenting, what you're sharing?
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah, the screen you should be seeing.
Yeah.
GYA 2. Yeah, I see that.
And I hope. Yeah. Okay. All right, Ken. Should we? Let me break the recording into 2 pieces now. Hold on. I'm gonna stop the share for a minute. Stop the recording.